Good morning, everyone. Welcome to TeleShadowing. We're live on YouTube. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat box as we go along, and they'll be addressed. I'm honored to introduce our mentor for today, Dr. Cheema. Dr. Cheema is an accomplished attending physician. She completed her internal medicine residency at the University of South Florida. She is a mentor to students and a published author in neuroendocrine tumors and infectious diseases. Dr. Cheema is an attending physician and teaches residents and medical students. Dr. Cheema participates in community services and believes in health for all. She's also running a clinic for low-resource patients. Now I'd like to request Dr. Cheema to begin today's session. Thank you.
Very good morning, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. I really appreciate Amna. So it's very pleasant weather this morning in Maryland. So I thought let's enjoy the nature while talking to you guys. So in my prior sessions, I already talked about my medicine journey, and I will skip that part to save time. I would like this session to be more interactive and would like participation. And it doesn't matter if you know the answer, just try your best, give your best educational guess. And the reason I'm asking you to participate, this is how you will brainstorm. It will give you the right direction. It will, so you can spend your time, your energy, your resources in the right direction to hit your target at the right time. And this is how it will make your life easy to achieve your life goals. So let's take a few minutes to talk about self and self-cares. So what is self? So we have to ask ourselves, what is self? So self basically is a person, is an individual. It's the individuality. It is a concept of being aware of person's attributes and their thought process. It is the perception of a collection of characteristics that defines us. And we all are unique. And what is self-care? What is well-being? What does self-care mean to us, mean to you? So self-care is the practice of taking actions at right time in the right direction to improve one's own health, protect one's own well-being. And feeling of well-being are the fundamental of the overall health of an individual. It enables them to successfully overcome the difficulties, the challenges, and achieve what they want in their life and achieve their goals. So well-being is not just the absence of any disease or any illness. It's a complex, it's a combination of a person's physicality, mental health, emotional health, and social health factors. And basically it's a state of being healthy, have a life satisfaction and happiness. So let's talk about how we can improve our well-being. So we already talked about in our prior sessions as well. So self has 4 domains, 4 areas, 4 quadrants. So physical health, physical intelligence, mental health, mental intelligence, emotional health, emotional intelligence, spiritual health, and spiritual intelligence. So we'll go over briefly one by one pretty quick so we can see how we can improve our all 4 quadrants of our self. So first of all, physicality, physical health, physical intelligence. So physical health again has 4 domains, and I made an acronym for myself. It's called SELF. S for sleep hygiene, E for exercise regularly, L for learn to manage stress on daily basis, learn coping mechanism, and F for food. So what does man mean by exercise? If we don't have time, even every day, make a habit of doing some regular, consistent, even 10 to 15 minutes, moderate physical activity. It's vital to keep our immune system healthy. And you can do any activities like go for a walk and brisk walking, bike riding, yoga, standing rather than sitting, taking the stairs up and down, stretching. So anything that keeps you moving is considered exercise. So it will help you because, you know, as in the medicine field or pre-health students, we have a long hours of study. So every 45 to 50 minutes, take a few minutes of break, stretch out your muscles, and regardless of a busy schedule. And I would like to share that my friend and I go for a brisk walk every evening, regardless of our busy schedule. So please make a habit, take some time for yourself for exercise on a daily, regular basis. And then most importantly, add nutritious diet, because what we eat makes all the difference to boost our immune system with our nutritious diet. So what you are supposed to do, consume a wide range of, you can add fiber, any antioxidant-rich food diet at every meal. Choose a rainbow of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and seeds, and also stay well hydrated. Keep yourself well hydrated with water. The daily goals for males is, I think it's 3.7 liters, and for females it's 2.7 liters. So please make a habit of a healthy diet as well. It makes a lot of difference to boost up our immune system. And next, quality sleep, sleep hygiene, a regular bedtime, and wake up at a regular time, go to bed at a regular time plays a vital role in our well-being. Aim to sleep for 7 to 9 hours is optimal, and develop a habit, set up an alarm, and avoid screen time about 60 to 90 minutes before you go to bed. And practice your rituals like writing a journal. You can write your goals for your next day, or read a good book, listen to some good music that make you relax. All right, so last but not least, mind your stress. Listen to your body, be compassionate with yourself. The stress hormone called cortisol, it suppresses our immune system. So when we are stressed, we have a high level of cortisol in our body that damages our immune system. And then our immune system is weakened, we are more prone towards infections. So please be mindful and adapt how we can do that. Adapt some coping mechanism that can help you to manage the stress on a daily basis. And as a result, it will reduce the cortisol level. So management of stress plays a vital role in our life. And like we can do some meditation, we can do some breathing relaxation techniques, listen to some good audiobooks, talk to your optimistic friends, and learn the best coping mechanism that will work for you. And please keep reminding about your physicality. So next domain of our self is emotional health, emotional well-being, emotional intelligence. So this emotional intelligence concept was first time given by Daniel Goleman in 1995. He wrote a book on it as well. If you want to learn more about it, I will recommend this book for you. And he mentioned that emotional intelligence plays a vital role in our success in our life. And it is as important as IQ. So it's like EQ is as important as IQ. And there's one study mentions that there are 27 emotions that we need to manage to keep ourselves healthy. And there are 7 universal emotions that we should be aware of: happiness, sadness, anger, fear, disgust, surprise, and the contempt. So again, there are 4 areas that we need to know, or you can say 4 skills in emotional health or emotional intelligence. First of all, self-awareness. What is self-awareness? It's called self-actualization, to know yourself. This means you must be aware of your emotions, your motives, recognize yourself, know yourself. So it's being said, you learn by knowing yourself, and this is how you know your strengths, your weaknesses, know your confidence level, do accurate self-assessment and learn how you can improve your weak areas, and to look into your weak areas and work on it and focus on to improve yourself. And now the next is self-management. So this is how we can call it self-regulation as well. So in self-management is a broad term, and it becomes your time management, self-discipline, adaptability, recognize your emotions, your anger management, your conflict management, and take the initiative. And so these are all different, your finance management. These are all the things come under self-management that you can work on, which areas of weakness you can work on it. And emotions are very contagious. You know, like for example, for some babies or some toddlers, they smile, we start smiling as well, regardless if we are stressed or not, right? So emotions are very contagious, and they are very strong emotions. They're full of energy. So we need to keep an eye on it, and we need to learn how to manage our anger. All right. And I would like to pretty quick, there's a very small portion in our brain anatomy, it's called amygdala. It's a small almond-shaped structure that controls our emotions. And you will learn more about it when you go to med school. I will leave it here. Just amygdala is one word. A for amygdala, A for anger management, okay? All right, so whenever you are in anger, say, okay, now I have to manage my amygdala, right? It's getting hyper. I need to manage how to manage my anger. All right, so there are different coping mechanisms we can do and adapt to help with anger management. And the third skill for emotional intelligence is social awareness. What is that? What does that mean? It means understanding of others, having empathy for others, meaning you have the ability to understand and share others' feelings and add values in others' lives as well. Even if you can help one person, it's a great achievement. We don't have to think, okay, I have to always take small baby steps and you will have a big impact. So please keep an eye on your social awareness as well. And the last skill that we need to learn about emotional health is relationship management. It's very important. What does it mean? Handling the relations appropriately, your ability to manage your relationships, with your parents, with your siblings, with your friends, with your colleagues at workplace. And also, most importantly, in our profession, doctor-patient relationship is very important. And the most important skill to keep relationship is the communication skills. And be assertive in your communication. Learn conflict management. Learn how to resolve the conflict. We all human beings, we all do mistakes, right? But it's being said the best teacher is your last mistake, because you learn from your mistakes to avoid happening again. And you learn and you improve your learning curve. All right, and everyone always learn to collaborate with others, because work together as a team. Team stand for together, everyone achieves more. So always learn how to have a collaborate with others, teams working, how you can work in a team. And of course, we all human beings are different, right? So take good care of your loved ones. Don't take them for granted. So all take good care of your relations. And also don't compete with your relations. Value them, respect them, because care them, respect them as we want from them, right? So always try to be compassionate with them, and your only competition is with yourself, no one else, okay? Just remember. All right. So these are 4 skills: self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, and relationship management. All right, so let's move on to next self-domain is intellectual intelligence, intellectual health, mental health. IQ, what is IQ? We all know, right? His IQ high, her IQ is high. What does that mean? It means the capacity for learning, for reasoning, for understanding. It's basically the manifestation of higher faculties. It's a higher mental capacity. It's our cognitive skills. It's our mental capacity. And that involves the ability to reason, ability to plan, and ability to solve problems. Think analytically, learn quickly. And of course, sometimes it takes time to learn some concept, right? So don't feel bad about it. Just practice. And of course, working memory is very important. So 4 important components in the IQ is the verbal intelligence, your logical reasoning, working memory, and processing speed. And working memory, some people say, oh, our memory is not good. So there's hippocampus in the one anatomical area in our brain that helps us with our memory. So working memory is practice. Whenever you read books, we are human beings, we forget, read again. And this is how you will improve your working memory. So IQ doesn't mean the body of knowledge. It's related to the possession of the knowledge, your skills, your attitude to solve the problem, to solve the challenges, to make this place better for you and for whole community around you. All right, last but not least, the 4th domain of self-care or well-being is the spiritual intelligence, the spiritual health. What does it mean? What does spiritual health means? It means finding your why. Start with why. It will make your journey easy. Explore your spirituality, your spirituality core, by simply asking yourself, what is the purpose of your life? What is your meaning of life? Look for a deeper meaning. So you will, because I cannot tell you about yourself. So you have to explore yourself, find your why, and always start with why. And there is a very good book I can recommend by Simon Sinek. There's 2 books, Start with Why and Find Your Why. So this is how it will make your life and your journey easy to achieve your goals. And you ask yourself why you do what you do. So it will make your life very easy, I'm telling you. All right. So basically, spirituality has, again, 4 areas that I learn for myself, and I try to apply: moral values, our ethical values, what we can offer. Again, then the social responsibility. What does that mean? What we can offer to humanity, add values in others' life. And again, life purpose, meaningful life. And last but not least, attitude of gratitude. Always count your blessings. I would say we all who are here this morning, we all blessed, regardless of our challenges in our life, regardless of any sufferings in our life, because we all woke up this morning and we all are breathing, right? Isn't it a blessing? So main goal to breathe and breathe and breathe, right? And help yourself and help others. So this will contribute all our 4 domains of well-being, self-care, And these 4 domains are all interconnected. Like you can think of a table, right? Table has 4 legs. So if one leg is broken, if we are not working on just 3 areas and we are missing one area, so it will be imbalanced, right? So try to work on all 4 areas, but take small baby steps. Don't think you have to jump on, you have to go at the peak. No, small baby steps. And you will see at some point you will be mastered in all 4 areas. So one step at a time and one day at a time. And take care of your well-being. And then lastly, I would like to know why I'm spending time on your well-being, on your self-care, because you are the future of medicine. You are going to be leader in medicine. You are going to do innovations, right? Find new ways of managing patient care. They're ongoing research all the time. And they're all a lot of, if you go PubMed and new papers published. So you are the ones who will be doing more innovations. And how, if you will not take care of yourself, how you will take care of the other people, right? How you will take care of your patients, how you will serve humanity. So please be mindful, focus on your well-being, focus on your self-care, so you can achieve your goals, and always keep in mind why you do what you do, find your why, and have a purposeful life. All right, so as Amna mentioned, I am an attending physician. I do teach residents and medical students during morning rounds, and in the hospital settings, we come across difficult patients. So I thought, let's talk about difficult patients today, how to deal, what do we mean by difficult patients? And let's talk a little bit about it before we move on to the medical school admission process panel. All right, so what is considered difficult patient? So basically, difficult patients are defined as those who elicit a broad range of behaviors with sometimes with negative emotions. And if it's not acknowledged and if it's not managed correctly, these feelings can lead to diagnostic error. So there's a reason we need to understand, we need to learn. So to avoid diagnostic error, to avoid unpleasant confrontations and troublesome complaints and claims. So there's one study tells us that about 30% of the patients are difficult patients that we come across as a healthcare providers. So they have basically have ones who have a mentally or medically ill, and they have a complex social circumstances. They don't have a social support around them. They make them feel more frustrated, and they find some way to vent out, and they have behave in an angry and manipulative or hostile way. So that we need to learn, and if we learn, then we know how to manage. So basically, there are 4 types of difficult patients that every doctor has to deal with. And the Grooves is the author who mentioned this. He did a study. He mentioned that there are 4 different types of difficult patient every doctor has to deal with. The first one is the dependent clinger. These are the patients who pour on the praise. They flattered their physician into providing special privileges. So we have to be aware of it. Then next one is the entitled demander. So this type of patient likes to tell you what type of test they want to do, what type of medication they want to prescribe. So we need to aware about these demander as well. And then the next one is a manipulative, help rejecting complainer. This type of patient drag the physicians through an endless cycle of help seeking and help rejecting cycle. So they want to help, but of course they are so manipulators. So they want to do the way they want. So sometimes they help, accept the help, sometimes they reject. It's very hard to manage as well, but we'll go over how we can manage. And then last but not least, 4th one is the selective destructive deniers. Who are those patients? So these are the patients who knowingly continue the behavior that is dangerous for them, that is dangerous for their own health. Like patients who are diagnosed with a lung cancer, who has a smoking history, they keep smoking after being diagnosed with a lung cancer. Likewise, there's a patient who diagnosed with liver disease, a liver cirrhotic disease, or NSAID liver disease, who drink alcohol, they keep drinking. They don't stop their habits of drinking and smoking. So these are the ones, they are self-destructive deniers. So now, how to manage difficult patients, right? So we learned there are 4 types and how to manage difficult patients. So take a heart with you. Whenever you go see them, take a heart with you. What does that mean? HEART, hear them. Have a genuine empathy for them. Acknowledge, apologize for any situation, for any inconvenience. Respond appropriately. Take responsibility for action. So we'll go a little bit in detail. The most common and apparently most effective means of coping is to, first of all, be a good listener, be an active listener, have a genuine empathy, ability to be empathetic towards the difficult patient. It will make your encounter much easier, and always show genuine empathy towards them. And always, whenever you face the encounter with difficult patients, be patient. You have to be patient and have non-judgmental listening. So that's very important. It will help to run your encounter more smoothly. And of course, listen to the patient and accept words without any judgment. And of course, establish a clear framework of the encounter. What does that mean? Trying to plan ahead of time, and encounter with the difficult patient you have to set and define the time frame while giving them explanation about what to expect in the encounter, during the encounter. And also doctors can try to have a direct approach to speak in a clear language that cannot be interpreted differently. You can use layman language. Don't use too much medical terminologies. It makes them more frustrated to control the course of the meeting. And also avoid confrontation with the patient, be cooperative with and involve the patient's families. Listen to them as well. And on the condition, of course, that they are willing to cooperate, and it will help you to understand and better management of patient care. And last but not least, use of the humor. It's being said, laughter is the best medicine, and I can tell you it is. So laughter basically decreases, as I mentioned before, the cortisol, the stress hormone, decreases the stress hormones and increases the immune cells in our body. So even laughter triggers the release of a very good hormone is called endorphin, and it's a body's natural feel-good chemical. And the endorphins promote an overall sense of well-being, and it can even temporarily relieve the pain as well when the high level of endorphin in our body. So laughter is the best medicine. Just try to be, I tell for my patients when I finish my encounter, now give me a smile. If a morning smile, call them morning smile time. Then if afternoon smile time, evening smile time. So I tell them you have to smile 3 times a day: morning smile, afternoon smile, evening smile. So most of the patients tell me, Dr. Cheema, we remember we have to smile 3 times a day. So I said, thank you, I really appreciate. All right. So in a nutshell, understand the situation. Whenever you have encountered with difficult patients, whenever you will be in med school, or if you're doing shadowing in person, so you'll see sometimes we all face the difficult patients. So in a nutshell, understand the situation, show genuine empathy with the patient, and manage your emotions as well. And create a safe space for open communication. And practice active listening, watch your body language, set boundaries, and connect them to provide additional support, and figure out the solution to help our patients and provide the best possible patient care at our level best. This is how we can do. And of course, while we are talking about the well-being, we talk about one of the domain that we can apply here. Can someone tell me, or just chat in the chat box, type in the chat box what we talk about during one of the domain of well-being that we can apply here? Let's see if we get any responses. Let's see if you guys are listening or not. So we talk about 4 domains of well-being, and one domain we can apply here. Let's see in the chat box. I'm trying to figure it out. Okay, so we talk about the emotional health, right? Yes, here we go. So Zach mentioned emotional health. Yes, you're right. So that's why now you can interconnect well-being and now the patient care. So you're applying here, right? So it will help you. You have high emotional intelligence, high EQ, not IQ, I'm talking EQ. So that's why you need to improve your EQ as well for your emotional health and to manage these such difficult situations. So this is very important, and we need to apply emotional intelligence for our emotional health as well as to take care of your patient as well, right? So emotional health, and we talk about the social awareness as well. So we need to know why they're behaving like this, what's going on, right? So if you get emotional, if you get angry, if you get upset, how you will manage the situation. So that's why EQ is very important. All right, so that's why I always try to talk about the well-being before move on to any session. So if you open up all my sessions, you will see 4 domains. I think most of you now have ingrained in your hippocampus. All right, so now let's move on to our student panel discussion about the medical school application. So as we know, the application process, next slide, let me move on to the next. Okay, so now as we know, the application process has been started on May 31st for the upcoming cycle. And it's best to learn from the students who have applied this cycle or currently experience the medical school admission process. And today we have 3 wonderful students with us on our panel who will be talking about their experience. So please feel free to interact, ask questions in the chat box, and they will be addressed. And I would like to talk pretty briefly. By this time, you should have been done with your MCAT score, or if you are in the process, it's okay. But students will talk more about it. And then now application accepted from May to September, and then interview session season starts mid-August onward. So we have 3 wonderful students named Raneem, Nora, and Minahil. They all 3 went to the University of Maryland, College Park, and they all 3 are under in the application process, and I will like to welcome them to begin today's panel. Thank you, Raneem, Nora, and Minahil.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cheema. I really appreciate the kind introduction. So just to start off our panel, we're going to be introducing ourselves, where we are in the process, and our majors. So we're going to have the screen shared again. All right. It's exciting. So this is the first time we're having students kind of pitch into one of our physician shadowing sessions to talk about, now that we've started the application session, it'll be interesting to kind of learn from us. So we can go on to the next slide, please. All right, Raneem, take it away.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Raneem. I'm a senior at the University of Maryland, College Park. I am majoring in neurophys. On a pre-med track. I'm hoping to become a surgical oncologist. I did apply on May 31st. I've actually started to get back some of my secondaries. I just got some yesterday. And a little fun fact, I'm in Egypt right now. So while it is 10:30 where you are at, it is 4:30 for me here. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Hello, everyone. I'm Nora Fadul. I am also a senior at the University of Maryland. I'm actually graduating at the end of this fall. I'm a neurophys major, but I'm also minoring in public policy and general business. I have not actually submitted my application. I am going to be submitting within the next 2 weeks because it's like the best to submit before June ends. And a fun fact about myself is that I raise chickens. So you don't have to be like purely pre-med all the time and just do all these like sciencey extracurriculars. You can have hobbies. That's a normal thing to have and a good thing to have, actually.
Thank you. I think the next slide is frozen for me. Can you go back and forth? Perfect. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Minahil Cheema. I just graduated from the University of Maryland in May, so last month. I was also a neurobiology and physiology major with a minor in public policy. I applied to medical school on June 1st. I'm also receiving some secondaries. A fun fact about me, I've moved many times in my life. I lived in Florida, Michigan, Canada, etc., and finally Maryland, my favorite place to be. And now that you've kind of heard about our majors, you don't have to be a neurobiology and physiology or a neuroscience major to actually apply to medical school. You can actually be any major you want to be. Really only half of, I've heard some statistics where only half of neuroscience majors actually are pre-med or go to medical school. You can really major in anything and you can apply to medical school, which we'll be getting into later, but I know some finance majors in college have applied, public health science majors, English majors, even some chemical and biomedical engineering majors. So it's been really fun to kind of see how medical school admissions has been starting to become much more multidisciplinary with people of different majors, because all you have to do is really complete your course prerequisites. So we can move on to our outline next. So what we're going to be getting into are these 6 things. We've organized it such that you can ask us questions as we go along. So if you put your question into the Zoom chat box, we'll address them as a panel together. So really it's up to what you would prefer. So we're going to start off with the pre-med process, kind of making sure we're all on the same page. You may already know this, but it's important for some of the high school students that we have in our program to understand what is the pre-med process like in America and the United States, especially for our international audience. And we'll be moving on to what a committee is like, what it means to start early in your application, what the different processes are like, the different application services, taking gap years, timelines, how you actually submit, some common misconceptions that I wish I knew when I was starting out. So, and then we'll finally conclude with some resources. So we'll be having Q&A throughout So usually we have Q&A at the end, but this time we'll be welcoming any Q&A you have throughout, and you can put that in the Zoom chat box. All right, so just to start off with the pursuit of medicine. So you decide to finally apply to medical school or osteopathic medical school, or even if you want to go in any other pre-health track, this is kind of where you go. We share similar experiences, even if you are pre-nursing or pre-PA. So we can move on to the next slide where we'll kind of talk about our own experiences. These are a couple of my own, but we've actually been able to volunteer at different places. We've kind of had a really interesting time with COVID-19 as well. I mean, we're all here on Zoom, and the pandemic is still a thing, but we have been able to transition back into some in-person experiences. So I'll start off with some of my own clinical experiences I've had, and then I'll kind of pass it over to Raneem and Nora for their experiences. So I've actually been able to volunteer in a couple of hospital settings, which has been really fun, but of course it's been limited. My first experience was canceled due to the pandemic, and that's what really inspired me to start teleshadowing as well. So Raneem and Nora, either one of you can go ahead and take it away. What were your clinical experiences like?
I can start. So I was actually really fortunate that I have some family that's already like running some clinics that I was able to volunteer and start working at. So I highly encourage, I know there's a lot of people saying like, don't work for your family, but they're not the only people working there. Like you don't have to directly work with like your cousin or your dad or your uncle. You can work with, they have coworkers too, like you can work with them. But like take advantage of those resources. I was really lucky. So I was working in urgent care. Well, it started as primary care, and then they added urgent care back in 2015. So I've had a long time. There's like this misconception that I actually keep hearing a lot from people where they think like, oh, front desk isn't really like clinical. It is the best front door job to get into clinical, and it is clinical because you are directly interacting with patients. I saw a really funny thread somewhere where they're saying, if you can smell the patient, it's clinical. I was like, yeah, you can smell the patient at the front desk. It's also a really good place to learn what patients go through right before they go meet with the doctor. Like insurances, you will learn a lot about. Surprisingly, it doesn't make sense, but you'll know what I mean if you work it. But you will learn a lot about patients at the front desk through like dealing with their insurances and talking to them, because that's you are the first point of contact. You set the stage for when they walk into the doctor's office, and that is the most important role to have when a patient first walks in, because they're not coming to the clinic because they're happy. They're coming to the clinic because they're sick and they're upset and they're not feeling well. And it's your job to make them feel safe and comfortable and like ready to go to the provider. And from there, you can work your way through the office. I also highly recommend to learn as much as you can at every part of the office, because I have worked with some nurses and physicians and MAs. I'm an MA now, so I learned this recently, but it's a team. It's not a one-man show. It's not a one-girl show. You have to work together. That is the whole shebang of medicine.
Okay, so I actually don't have a lot to talk about here because I don't have as much clinical experience, but I did also work at an urgent care. It was a COVID testing center. It was last winter break. And I worked there over the winter break. And like she said, I did a lot of front desk work, COVID testing, a lot of interacting with patients. And I did do a lot of virtual shadowing during the pandemic because my dad has like a lot of underlying conditions and I didn't want to like be exposed to COVID, like peak pandemic. So yeah, a lot of it was virtual shadowing and then working at an urgent care or COVID testing clinic.
All right, wonderful. Yes. And Nora, I think you also had some experience entering the clinical space. I know personally for me, I started off when COVID started, the peak started, I really wanted to contribute and help reduce the spread of COVID-19. So there have been a lot of volunteer COVID-19 swabbing positions. So I learned a lot about how do you actually swab. And I actually didn't work with physicians. I worked with many nurses. I learned a lot about the teamwork aspect of when it comes down to medicine, because it's not just a physician, really it's a teamwork. And I think that every single health professional has their role in the patient's overall health and well-being.
Yeah, COVID-19 was both a blessing and a curse in many different ways. At our clinic, when COVID hit, a lot of people got scared, like you said. It upset a lot of people, but it also, like, you have to respect people's feelings and space. Like, this is their health. It's not just their health, because a lot of the thing that I think there's a lot of like talk about is that your health isn't always your own, especially when there's a global pandemic. What you do and how you're feeling affects others. So like, people, most obvious is that you might have family that's like immunocompromised, or you have children and grandparents, and like, you don't want to like, it's like a, what do you call it? The epidemiology of disease is like a really big deal right now. And when it happened, we lost a lot of staff at our clinic because they did not want to risk their health or their family's health. So we had a shortage, and it was so beautiful to see how people did come together at that during those tough times at our clinic. It was rough at the beginning because there was a lot of transitions. We went from like 50-50 primary care to urgent care to like 90%, if not 100%, 99% urgent care, just focused on COVID testing. We were the first and only COVID testing center in our like 20-mile radius area for like the first year and a half. We had a lot of issues, but like, we worked it out really quickly. Where was I going with this? I had a point. Right. So it was actually a really big example of how important it is to work together, because if it wasn't for our front desk and our MAs keeping patients calm and in order. Oh, I have a really good example. Peak pandemic, where it was like people wanted to travel, but like they were shutting down all the planes, emergency visits. We had really long lines outside our offices just to get a COVID test. And the issue is that no one was able to turn around testing kits within like 24 hours for flights. And we were the only ones doing it in like a 50-mile radius. So we had really long lines, but with long lines in the cold, people will get upset and very anxious because they want to get tested and leave and go as soon as possible. So a lot of our staff was just working on like helping patients feel comfortable, safe, warm. And that required a lot of communication between staff and patients as well. That is a big part of medicine. I think one thing that I recommend pre-med students do is work on your communication skills and talk to patients, like listen to what they need and how they're feeling, and then communicate that to your coworkers, the provider, because that is a huge part of medicine. Let's see. Oh yeah, and then like swabbing. One thing I wish I did more was like being a little bit more of a go-getter, because it took me a while to get to the point where I was able to start helping with the swabbing, because there was a lot of focus on just like organizing things, but there's always a need everywhere and anywhere in a medical clinic. And sometimes it really just takes you asking, hey, can I please help with this? And then they'll be like, oh yeah, we do need help with that. And there you go, opportunity right there. So it's just one of the hardest things I think we have as pre-meds is like, we're so scared to ask. Just ask. That's our motto in my family. It's kind of a joke, but it's also like serious, like just ask. 2 simple words, like, can I ask you a question? Go for it.
You're right. Actually, to bounce off of that, I think that the worst that someone can say is no. So I think it's so important to ask and explore, because the worst they can say is no. That's okay. When one door closes, another one opens. And so the theme and what we're trying to say here, no stands for next opportunity. And even though many experiences were canceled due to the pandemic, many medical schools are now expecting some clinical experiences that are in person. And so what TeleShadowing is working on is actually trying to transition with that different transition and expectation with admissions committees. So switching gears a bit, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this slide where I'm going to annotate the screen. So let me see, view options, annotate. So what I wanted to explain here with this arrow, so the high GPA and high MCAT score, these two are your base, and definitely we need to make sure that we're maintaining proper grade. We make sure that we're able to have the GPA that we want. Of course, there is not necessarily a minimum or a minimum MCAT score and a minimum GPA, but they do help you get your foot into the door. But after that, as a result of increasing competitiveness in the sphere where many people are having the same GPAs, same MCAT scores, what differentiates us is our experiences, and how we can stand out as applicants is actually through these people experiences that Nora is talking about, where I'm sure that I have no doubt that she'll be a very successful applicant, even though we're in the same cycle, because of how she's able to articulate her experiences. She's not necessarily talking about her grades, that you can see her experience studying, because I know as her study buddy and throughout the years that we've been in college together, she is such a hard worker in a sense where she would definitely stay, those late nights studying. We don't really talk about that because we have other things to talk about. I think that's very important in maintaining this work-life balance, these sacrifices that we have to make for this profession. And college is nothing compared to medical school and then residency. Ultimately, what we've learned from the teleshadowing physicians throughout the past year and a half, definitely it's a continuum. So this is your base, but what differentiates you is your experiences and how you talk about it. So we're going to talk more about how we can all stand out as applicants, because I believe that all of us have that capacity. And it's important to also note that what I tell my fellow pre-meds, my peers who tell me, like, why do you always share your advice with other people? There's this saying in the pre-med atmosphere where it tends to be very competitive and tends to be very gatekeeping. And unfortunately, I think that we should be encouraging each other. I think that we should be helping each other up, because ultimately you are just competing with yourself and being the best possible version of yourself, because there will always be someone with a better MCAT score or a better GPA than you. So I think that's very important to understand, that we are just competing with ourselves. And so I just wanted to compete with myself and be the best version I could be throughout my experience. And that's what I felt confident about when I hit that submit button for my application. So for our next slide, ultimately what I'm trying to say here is that this is definitely a marathon and not a race. I'm sure you've heard this already many, many times, but coming from students and people who are in your shoes and are still in your shoes, I think it's really important to know that we're all going through it together. But ultimately, what we want to do is serve humanity, serve people. I know that sometimes many of us get stuck in the weeds of studying and organic chemistry and all these different classes that Nora and Raneem know I did not like and suffered through, but we got through it together. And I think that making a study group like I had with Nora and Raneem throughout college has been really helpful to me, going through the experiences that I was most passionate about, actually with patients, and actually where I wanted to be and where I want to dedicate myself and ourselves to patient care for the rest of our lives. All right, and so continue on to a bit of more logistics. Now that we've kind of touched base on our experiences, everyone's experiences are going to be very different. Even though Nora and Raneem and we were in the same classes together, we've lived in the same state, we have completely different applications, even though we all study together, are part of the same clubs. So I think that's why we're not really talking that much about our experiences per se, because they're not going to be the same to yours and the different reflections that you'll have. But what is kind of a universal thing is having a pre-health advising office. So on the next slide, I'm going to talk about our pre-health advising office and how it is sort of similar to many other college campuses out there. If you can. All right, yes, sorry, it's a little laggy on my end. So when we're gaining experiences, just note that these websites are available to everyone. So you don't have to be a University of Maryland student to access this type of resources, these opportunities. So really what I would recommend is, if you don't have a pre-health office, etc., first of all, there is the AAMC website. They have many great resources and actually refer you to a national free health professional advising service for students who don't have that at their colleges. But also there are ways to just Google your neighboring colleges and universities that may have one, because ultimately you're just looking for experiences, and that's not exclusive to those students, because this information is all available to you. These are all websites that you and I can both access. All right, let me move my arrow away. Let me clear all drawings. There we go. My arrow is gone. So now I want to talk about the timeline and how far in advance you need to apply. So I've had a few students when I've mentored a couple of students. And so I always start off by asking them, when do you want to start medical school? I think that's the best way to sort of deduce if you need a gap year or multiple gap years or none at all. So I know that Nora and Raneem are not taking any. sort of avoided one, but I did graduate, so I am just waiting on my application. So, so if you move on to the next animation here, how far in advance to prepare? So first, you start off when you would like to start medical school. I think that's the best place to start. Then then you decide on what type of clinical experiences you need. Let's say maybe you might need a gap year, not because you need to take your MCAT, but maybe because you need more clinical experiences. And that's also a reason why some people may take a gap year. Some people call it enrichment years too, because I think it's great being able to get into the professional world and talk to people outside of students, because I feel like we've been students for such a long time that it's important to increase your exposure. So if you don't want to take a year off, I know that many of us didn't. I know us on the panel did not want to do that. So we decided to actually start studying and preparing for our MCAT, because you need to take that for admission into medical colleges in the United States by maximum, the latest, the summer of your third or junior year. But that doesn't mean you can't take it after your sophomore year. It really depends on when you're finishing your course prerequisites. Because these course prerequisites, like your 2 semesters or 3-4 semesters, biology, chemistry, physics, sociology, psychology, which aren't prereqs, but they're recommended, they all help you for your MCAT. So really, when you're taking these courses, what's best to think about is, how can this help prepare me for my MCAT? So one pro tip I have for the underclassmen out here is invest in an MCAT prep book set before you start even thinking about your MCAT. I know that's what the 3 of us did. We just would reference our MCAT books while we were in our freshman biology class, for example. I think that helped a lot when we were actually studying for the MCAT in our 3rd year, because we've already been highlighting and going through these books. So I think it's really important. Why not invest in it now if you're going to buy one later on anyway? So I think that's what every freshman should do. Buy a MCAT prep book set if you know that's what you want to do. If not, that's fine too. People can also resell their books, but I think it's important to sort of contextualize the courses that you're taking. It helps a lot in motivation as well, because there's a lot of science. Being able to see its connections in the MCAT and then also in the future to your patient care helps a lot, as well as making things more succinct for such a large exam, because the books are very, very thick. So this means that I would recommend you finish your prereqs before your target MCAT date. I know that I didn't take 1 or 2 prereqs before my MCAT, but I was still fine, because you can still self-study. That's always an option. And then another thing is, so if we applied our summer of after finishing junior year, that's when you actually get in without a gap year. So what I'm trying to tell you, I'll show you some visuals as well, where this means that if we are applying in 2022, we're actually applying for the cycle that'll start in fall 2023. So it's not like college undergraduate admissions where we're used to when we apply to college. You apply after your senior year of high school, and then you get in and you start in the fall. That's not how it works here. Basically what you have to do is you have to apply sort of a year-ish in advance, like 8-9 months in advance, before you actually start to hear back from medical schools and actually matriculate. Matriculate is the word that means actually starting medical school and starting it and getting in. You matriculate in the following year of your cycle. So yeah, I actually wanted to ask the panelists, how did you decide when to apply, and how did you decide when to take your MCAT?
So I decided while I was making my 4-year plan in like the summer before my freshman year, I wanted to not take a gap year. So I decided that I was going to take it like right after my junior year, or during like my spring semester of junior year, which was the semester that just passed. And so I just kind of structured my 4-year plan around that. So I like reduced the course load in the spring semester where I was going to take the MCAT, and like increased it in other places just so I can hit like the target credits that I need to graduate. And that was really just like, that's how I structured it. I bought my MCAT books in my freshman year. I kind of like divided the coursework. I didn't end up actually following the schedule that I made for myself due to like various reasons, but I would recommend that if you do buy your MCAT books early on and you already know what you're going to do and when you're going to take the test, to maybe divide it up a bit. Like Minahil said, maybe as you're taking your bio courses or as you're taking your chemistry courses, go through the books, highlight the things you've already taken, study from the books at the same time that you study like from your own course notes, and then just kind of like go through the books in that way. But yeah, I did decide in my freshman year, basically I didn't want to take a gap year. So I just decided that I was going to take the MCAT and apply right after my junior year.
Before I go, I also want to preface this that everyone's situation is unique. I know that I was lucky that I was already getting clinical, so I knew I wouldn't need to get extra clinical for the gap year. I have a cousin who is actually an economics major. So like example, he's pre-med economic major, taking extra classes to be pre-med. And he chose to take 2 gap years. The first gap year was because for his major, he had to take an extra year in addition to the science classes prerequisites for medical school. And then the second gap year is because he wanted to take a job for 2 reasons. One, because it would be clinical experience, and 2, because he needed the money to pay for medical school. So like everyone's experience is unique. And now he's applying this cycle with me. So I would love to go to the same school. And yeah, my biggest regret is actually not starting as well. I mean, I won't say it's a big regret. It depends from person to person, but I think it does really help if you start your freshman year while you're taking your pre-med requirements to get a MCAT. So like any MCAT prep course will work for this. And then just to start really like, if there's anything you want to actually memorize past a test in your class, it is the MCAT topic requirements. Me personally, I used a company called the Altius because I liked how their structure is essentially self-study with a guided tutor, and then little class sessions to like go in depth in topics that you're learning. And their textbook, I also had somebody gave me their Princeton books. There's like 8 of those big fat chunky books. I don't like those big fat chunky books. Altius is literally an outline in a single book for every single topic that you need to know. The only thing that they're kind of weak on is Psych Soc, but there's a really wonderful outline list, either from Miles Down or from Khan Academy, which I would use that just to like definitions for the psych section. But yeah, like starting early, and that will really help you relieve a lot of stress. I highly recommend it. For me, when I knew that I wanted to be a doctor going into college, so I tried starting as early as I can to plan things out, and I knew I didn't want to take a gap year because I also didn't really need to. But for me, unlike my wonderful friends who managed to take their MCATs on time, my timeline for my MCAT was all over the place. So I was like, let me take it after my sophomore year because I'll know everything I need to know by then. Didn't happen. Okay, fine. I'll take it in my winter semester, right, going between in the middle of my junior year. So I had my junior, fall, winter, take my MCAT, spring, focus on school. Didn't happen. Thank you for showing up the timeline. Then I was like, okay, fine. I'll take it in like March. I was like, no, it's not plausible. So I was like, April, that's a great time to take it. My friends were taking it in April. We're going to take it together and be done with it. And I quickly realized, like, hey, if I study, like, you know yourself best. And I knew that the more I studied, the better my score got. And I was like, okay, if I just take an extra month to study for this, I'll be like a really good score. I'm so glad I did that because I just took my MCAT like 2 weeks ago. Yeah, I know, June. That's not that late. You can do it and still apply this cycle. And I feel really good about it. So it really depends on you. But being organized helps a lot, but I know plenty of people. My older sister is not the most organized person. She had a plan. It changed every single minute. That's fine. You know yourself best. As long as you have a general outline, that's the way to go. Like every author, I'm not an author literally, but they have an outline first. They don't know how. People that I've spoken to at the very least who have written things is that they say, I know the beginning and I know the end. I know the major milestones in between. How I get to those points, I don't know until I start writing. You won't know until you start living your life through that time to figure out how everything's going to end up setting into place. So like, don't be too stressed out about these things.
That's very true. I actually don't know anyone who's had this who's set an MCAT schedule before starting study and then not changing it, because when you start your MCAT schedule, you need to be open to being flexible and changing it because life happens. Life is not ideal. People give you ideal timelines, but it's okay to push back your MCAT if you don't feel ready. Taking gap years for the MCAT, that is fine because this is our journey. The pathway to medicine is not linear, where it's high school and college and medical school. Sometimes they're not even bumps in the road. They're you and who you are and what you're making of your life. And when you're dedicating yourself to a profession where you're you're training for about 11 years after high school, I think that that's an investment you need to make in yourself and making sure that this is the profession you want to actually pursue. So here is my 4-year plan. I graduated college in 3 years instead. So I made sure that in purple are actually my MCAT prereqs. So I made sure to, or medical school prereqs as well. So I kind of, that's kind of how I marked it off, like, okay, let me get this done. And then I would actually write down like in the winters what I was doing. So I think that in your 4-year plan, you should also include what you're doing in the winters and summer semesters, because you'll learn if you start college, you have a lot of time on your hands sometimes. I know that's a controversial statement. It really depends. But I felt like I had a lot of time on my hands personally. And so I wanted to do a lot more during winter and summers when I was not taking any courses. So if you transition on next, yes. So basically, this was my transition here to kind of ask you guys, so what's unique about this 4-year plan? Well, let me answer that for you. The uniqueness is basically how I would kind of write down what I'm doing every summer. So these are just fillers. I did different things, but this is like a good plan to go off of. Also, because I wanted to fit in a minor in 3 years, I also marked that off. I just color coded. It helped me. Whatever works for you. I know that every college provides a 4-year plan. I didn't like the way mine was because mine wasn't very colorful. It was black and white. So I wanted to make mine more aesthetically pleasing. So just I would look at it. I would look at this like multiple times every semester because I would keep changing it. At first it was a 4-year plan, then a 3.5 plan, then a 3, then back to 4. So like Nora was saying, like no one is really as linear as they may make themselves seem to be. There are many medical influencers that you may see on Instagram. I know I follow many of them, and I'm so inspired by the work that they're doing. I think it's also important to note that success is only the tip of the iceberg. We don't show our failures. We don't show our struggles, the nights, the all-nighters we've pulled for many of these classes and the GPA that we need, or the GPA that we're just targeting for. So it's really important to just stay flexible. This is a Google sheet. So just that's what helped me move things around all the time. So that was put in my head, like I can change this. I can add a minor, I can take out a minor, I can change around my major. So yeah, let's go to the next slide. All right, so now we're going to move on to starting early and why we recommend starting early. You don't always have to start early, but 2 out of 3 of our panelists today did apply when the application cycle opened. But if we're going to go through pros and cons, because this is not a black and white, because you should not compromise the quality of your application just to apply early. That does not help you. But let's say you can be made ready, and that's through planning ahead. So if we move on to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about, this is a quote I found online when I was Googling, like, hey, like, why is it important to apply to medical school early? I really like this analogy by this person named Hayden Smith. I'll read it out for you all. For most medical schools are on a rolling admissions timeline. So what that means is imagine musical chairs, but the music starts as soon as the first people show up and stops before everyone gets there. So what that means is that medical schools, as you all know, have a limited number of seats, and more people are applying every year than people who are able to have seats. And that's what makes medical school admissions so competitive, because if there are I'm not exaggerating, if there are 10,000 applicants and only 200 seats, I think that's why medical schools have rolling admissions, because they start to look at the applications that they get in first. And there are different waves and different cycles. So for example, if I applied June 1st, but another person applied to June 12th, there's actually no difference between our 2 weeks, because medical schools won't see my application until June 24th, which was yesterday. So that's something to also think about, where you don't actually see, these are different waves that you're applying in. I just wanted to get it done with, because for my personal reasons, because I started working full time after graduating. So those are my reasons as to why I wanted to apply early and just kind of not have to worry about it. And now I have secondaries. So this is what rolling admissions means. Basically, first come, first serve. But not always, because there are people who also apply in late summer, but have great stats, and they would be prioritized over someone who has lower stats, but decided to apply early just for the sake of applying early. So it's all about knowing yourself and planning ahead. I know that for me, I worked on my application a year in advance. So like I started in December and I applied in June. So because I started in December, I didn't find any problems applying early. And I started early because of my pre-health advising office recommended that we do this committee packet where we had to write down, kind of pre-write some secondaries. And so I just wanted to get that in as soon as possible because they always tell us apply early, apply early, apply early. So I took that literally and just applied like around the first day it opened. But I mean, Raneem applied the day it opened. So that's very impressive. All right, now it's time for our timeline where basically we went over this with Dr. Cheema, but essentially if you go on to the next animation, you'll see here that this is a medical school HQ / medical school insiders graphic. But basically what they're saying here is that it's not just your application. Once you're done with the application, we call that a primary. After that is a secondary, that's step 3. And then after that, you have interviews, then you have your decisions. So it's not just you're applying, you're done. You actually started the secondary season. So Raneem was talking about she already started her senior secondaries. Secondaries are basically secondary applications where medical schools want to get to know more about you beyond your first initial primary application. What that means is that that's why you should apply the sooner you apply, because you're not actually done. You have to wait. Medical schools don't consider your application complete until you finish their supplemental essays, you could call them. Supplemental essays that they release towards the end of June. And that's if you applied and they received your application. So I'll get more into the timeline in the next slide, but does anyone have any questions so far? You can go to the next slide, that's fine. But does anyone have any questions? Just wanted to stop and pause for any questions. If I'm going too fast, feel free to let me know. But it's also some of the things that many people kind of know about because they're told this and to apply early. Yeah, another thing to really keep in mind is that when you're applying to, the average number of schools that people are applying to is between 17 to 25. But something to keep in mind is that if you apply to 17 to 25 schools, you will receive these schools supplemental or secondary applications. They range from an extra 3 to 5 essays per school. That means you have around 80 to 100 essays, mini essays to complete within a month, because you kind of have to get these secondaries in, otherwise your application isn't considered complete. And so they won't actually review it until you get your secondaries in. So, but this is something that you'll understand, and it'll make more intuitive sense when you get really close to this. I'm getting into really the nitty-gritty details, and some advice I have to relegate that if you do want to apply to 25 schools is I'd recommend straight up just, but I know some people just apply to 5 and then they apply to another 5 and another 5. That way, they're still getting their secondaries in on time in a timely manner and getting their essays in without getting too overwhelmed. So, you know yourself best, and that's kind of how it works. So in purple, you'll see here an ideal and a possible timeline. So I kind of look at these with a grain of salt because, like I said, everyone's path, we're all snowflakes, as in we're all very unique people and we have very different timelines. I know Nora just took her MCAT 2 weeks ago, and that was totally fine, even though it doesn't fall necessarily in the ideal purple range. But it's still early enough that she'll get her score in by mid-July and be totally fine to submit her primary. So that's kind of things to keep in mind. I know for me and Raneem, for example, since I can just give you an example so that I can annotate. So Raneem and I took our MCATs in March. We got our scores by April. So the reason why we decided March is just in case we have to retake. Heaven forbid, if we had to retake it, we would have some more wiggle room to retake it, but fortunately we didn't need to retake it. I thank Raneem for helping me study for that MCAT and keeping me disciplined, but definitely that's why we chose. Some people, I know some seniors, they take it in January to also have wiggle room for February, March to retake it if needed. There's a common misconception where people think that you only can take the MCAT once and you're not supposed to retake it again. That's true to a degree. I think that, like I said, there's no black and white way to get into medical school nowadays because there are so many more applications, so many more ways to tell your story that if you feel that you would do better the next time around, why not retake it? That would be my mindset, but that is my opinion. I definitely defer to our pre-med advising and advisors who know you best and your transcript and your abilities and capacities. So once you're done with MCAT, that's when you're able to actually submit your application. So let me see, I see a question in the Zoom chat box. How many months in advance did you start heavily studying for your MCAT before your test date? That's a great question. I would recommend a minimum of 3 weeks of full-time studying if you can. So that's why I would recommend like a August date if you're planning on, so if you take it in August and you have these 3 months to really study full-time for an August date. Another good date would be January. This is also a really popular date because you have winter break to study. I know a lot of students get winter off. So for me personally, I started studying full-time in the winter, which was here. This is the winter. Let me also tell you this. I planned on taking my MCAT in January and I took it in March. So it did not work out the way I planned either. So I wanted things in early, but didn't work out. That's okay. I pushed it to March and it all worked out in the end because I had an extra month to sort of study and get into the groove. So when it got here, this was I was still studying. I was still a full-time student. So I really had to get my classes done and you get the homework done probably while I was on campus. And then I got home and started full-time grind studying, had to delete my social media apps. I'm sure you've heard the whole spiel, but a minimum, I would recommend 3 weeks if you can full-time studying. If you have to work, I would recommend come home from work and get studying because this is definitely something that you have to dedicate full focus to. I wouldn't recommend studying like 11 months in advance. It's much better to, of course, when it comes down to long-term studying and long-term retention, you want to try to have study 3 hours a day so that you don't have to cram 12 hours in one day. That's true. That's true for our midterm exams. But for the MCAT, I would say that this is mostly, in my opinion, 70% critical thinking and 30% content review and content actually questions. When you get into practice questions, you'll learn that it's a lot of critical thinking and you can answer a lot of questions without knowing a lot. And that's why I'd recommend 8-hour day studying at minimum. Personally, I would do 10 hours studying. I know that's a lot, 5 days a week, and I would take a day off, a breather day when I was around this stage. So it was in winter. The reason why I pushed my MCAT was because I was not as full-time as I wanted to be during my winter break. And that's why I pushed because I didn't feel ready. So Raneem, how far in advance did you start studying for your MCAT?
That's a great question. So initially I had planned on kind of like starting to review things, not full-time studying, but like an hour of studying a day, starting from the summer after my sophomore year. So I had already bought the books a while back and I thought I would like start skimming through the books, reviewing old things, and then maybe like start full-time studying a lot closer to the test that I took in March. But that didn't end up working out. I had like a lot of things pop up and I didn't study at all in the summer and I didn't study at all in the fall semester of my junior year. And then I started studying in the winter break right before like my spring semester where I took the MCAT, and then I got COVID and I stopped studying. And then I started studying again like late January, early February. So I wouldn't recommend that. Obviously, it was the month before my MCAT, but I did kind of start like full-time studying. I was also taking courses at the time, but like I'd come home after class, finish my homework, study for my exams, and then I'd also study for the MCAT. And it was a lot of sleepless nights. Like I was getting like 4 hours of sleep a night, 3 hours, because I really like I was in like a really tight deadline. So yeah, for me, it was like heavy studying February and March to make up for all the time I didn't study before. So yeah, it was like a month or two, but that was because I didn't follow my timeline. If you do follow your timeline and like review over the years, you shouldn't need to like heavily study for a month or two. You shouldn't need to sacrifice sleep as much as I did. But if you are on like a really tight schedule and you find that your exam is in a month or two and you're not as ready as you should be, like don't panic. You can like prepare. You've taken a lot of the courses already. It shouldn't be like that big of a deal. So yeah, it's not that big of, you shouldn't stress out too much is what I'm trying to say.
Raneem, that's funny you say because I remember how stressed you were during that time. And I like how we were both very stressed. And so now that we're reflecting and having the opportunity to talk to you all, I received a question in the chat box. How do you stay focused for 10 hours straight? I know that I had no idea how I could do that either. You don't know until you're actually doing it. I started off in chunks. So I started off doing like an hour a day, then the next day to 2 hours a day, 3 hours, and then it got into a rhythm where I communicated to friends and family that I'm sorry, but for the next 2 months I'm studying. This is where you kind of set your boundaries with people. I'm a very social butterfly, huge social person, so my friends know that how terrible it was for me. But I knew that I was making a sacrifice for my future, for something I'm truly passionate about, because I would stay motivated by disciplining myself, but also understanding that this is just 3 months of my life. And if I can dedicate and stay focused for this amount of time, I'd be able to make the rest of my life happen, because we know how heavily the MCAT is emphasized in schools and of course for admissions, etc. But I think I can also defer to Dr. Cheema. Dr. Cheema, how did you actually focus when you were studying for your USMLE exams?
Good question. In the beginning, again, as I mentioned before, take baby steps. So just first hour, the next day, build up your stamina. Like when a runner build up the stamina, they just run few steps, then 1 mile, then 2 miles, then 5 miles, and I don't know how they do 10,000 miles, right? So of course, USMLE, when I was taking, and of course by board exams, we have to build up the stamina. So it's, again, as you mentioned before, it's a marathon, it's not a race. And of course, it's lifelong learning. And I really appreciate from all you three, you guys are really doing good. And please feel free to ask them questions, as many as you can. And it's, again, take small baby steps. Don't think that I have to study 10, 12 hours today. No, please build up a stamina, 1 hour today, then 2 hours, slowly. So you will see in a couple of weeks, it's all just, we are humans. We are creatures of our habits. So adapt the habits that give you benefit to you. So it's just a habit. So 1 hour, okay, you're tired. Of course, I mentioned even 12 hours, you have to take breaks. Every 45 to 50 minutes, just stand up, stretch out. Doesn't mean you have to go out to watch a movie for 3 hours break. No, I'm not saying that. So every 45 to 50 minutes, get up, go out, just drink some water, some stretch exercises, 5 minutes, and come back again. So of course, you have to cut down your social circle during that time. And of course, you already experienced, you all three, and of course, you guys all know who are studying, it's not just for anything you achieve in your life, not just for steps, for MCAT, we need to be disciplined. So what discipline means? Discipline means we have to do the same thing repeatedly, despite we want or we don't want. And there is a very good book, it's a 5 a.m. club. So if you read all the successful people, they always wake up in the morning, early morning. So early to bed, early to rise makes people healthy, wealthy, and wise. So I'm learning since I was a kid. So my father used to tell me about this. So this is my habit. I wake up early, like 4 a.m. I go to bed early, 9 p.m., 10 p.m. Not these days, because sometimes I'm on call, I'm awake late night. I'm just talking like since I was studying for my med school or pre-med and then my USMLEs. So this is my habit. I used to wake up early. I'm an early bird. Even I used to go my work early as well. I do rounds with my residents and students. I start early because it's better if we have to discharge the patient from the hospital, so we can do early rounds, we can make a plan, so make sure we are wrapping up all our stuff on time. So again, it varies from person to person, so just do whatever works for you. So just take small baby steps, and at the end, I learned, take small baby steps like ant, and slowly your steps will be like a big steps like elephant. Okay. So again, it's doable, and we all are gifted. We all have talents. We all are unique people. So just do whatever work for you. Let's put it this way. But baby steps definitely helps. All right, let's see if we have any other questions.
Yeah, and I think Nora also wanted to pitch in regarding her timeline, because hers was a little different since she took it in June.
Yeah, so mine was quite different. I know that everyone has different averages here. Like me, to answer your earlier question about like how you can focus for 10 hours, I can't. Not easily, at least. I was able to do it for most of the days, yes. And like she said, baby steps to get there for me. But I'm the kind of person who can never sit still, who can't focus for too long. Like literally while I'm sitting in my chair is vibrating like it's a level 10 earthquake or something. I can't sit still. I don't think that exists. So what I did, let's see here. Like I said, I initially planned to take my exam a lot earlier. I was going to start over the summer, just like Raneem did. I did do a bit of studying, but most of that time was just me learning, or like, honestly, it was just me reading the topics list. I was like reading a topics list, reading through a book that had like the stuff, but not attempting to memorize any of it. So at least I can refresh my memory or be familiar with the stuff. That was the minimum that I did in that summer. Then fall came and I really wanted to focus on doing all my classes. So I didn't really study for the MCAT. My real studying started in January. But then I also got COVID. Took a week off for that and got back to it. I think the average people usually say is like 3 months, or is it 3 weeks? I don't remember. I think it's 3 months.
3 months. 3 months. First month content review, and then the latter 2 months more practice questions. I think that the people, the old advice used to be 2 months content review and then 1 month questions. But I think people have started to be saying like use the first month, focus on getting the content down, and then the next 2 months on just practice questions.
Yeah. So for me, there's different ways to study, and that's why people have different timelines. Some people can do it in 3 weeks. Bless your souls, you're amazing. I wish I was you. And then there's people like me who needs to take like 6 months. But if you do take the long timelines, it's not impossible. And for some people, it's recommended if you want to retain that knowledge for a long time, depending on how you study though. I used Anki. It's a long-term study tool, which I think is you must use it if you plan to do long-term for the MCAT or really any class. I'm using it. I'm going to start using it now for actual classes, especially when I get to medical school, because there's this, what is that? Do you guys remember what it's called?
Long-term retention model.
Yeah, the long-term retention model, where you repeat, like it does it yourself. You're basically making flashcards, however you want to do it. There's a lot of tutorials on how to use it, and they're wonderful. I recommend the Anki. He is literally the king of using Anki. And it basically puts it in your long-term memory. The way, if you do short-term studying, it's more like you're focusing on like recognition or like short-term memory skills, which I do most of my life. But I was told by a lot of people in my family and my work environment, like saying, no, you want a long-term study for this one because you will need it in medical school. So I had to take the long-term route, and I highly recommend that. And the 6 months is perfectly possible with that. That's what I did. So don't be stressed out like, oh, I have to cram it all in 3 months because that's the best way for me to retain it. No, it's possible to retain that memory forever. I think I won't forget anything that I learned from the MCAT for a very long time now, because I'm actually still continuing my Anki, even though I've already taken my MCAT. I'm going to keep doing it until it says that I've perfectly memorized all of it. So don't worry too much about that timeline. That was probably my biggest point that I wanted to share. But it depends. If you want to retain it forever, long-term memory, use Anki. That is the way to go for you, especially if you're like me and you can't focus for like 10 hours a day. That's what I recommend. I was also working at the same time that I was studying over the breaks, so I couldn't focus for too long or take the full-time studying, and then I was in classes. So I didn't take the full-time hardcore study route until like winter break and summer.
That's a good point that you raised. I also received another question in DMs. Did you use a course or did you self-study? So Raneem and I, we both self-studied, but I know that you mentioned that you use Altius. I know there's other ones like Kaplan and Princeton, but I'm going to have to tell you that you can do either. I think that both work. It really depends on you knowing yourself best. So I know that Raneem and I, we preferred self-studying because we just, I just went on Reddit for a few hours and found all the resources I needed and left Reddit. After that, so Nora, you can tell me, I know you already talked about your test prep, so I'm going to start kind of advocating for self-study a little bit more and cutting you off, I know, but I think that
I'll supplement with you with more about my way mine works. It's not like any other test prep course. It's basically self-study, but I'll explain it later after you.
All right. Yeah. So I just self-studied by the basic principle that I know that I need to get my books done within the first month a few times, couple of read-throughs, finish my Anki content reviews, kind of get like a 60-70% pass. You don't need to memorize everything your first round. And then I spend the next 2 months just grinding my practice questions. And then I guess the second month, I kind of spent half content and half questions and then other one. But I think I would recommend people just straight go into the questions. When I say questions, I mean official test prep questions from the makers themselves, the MCAT official prep questions / UWorld. So Nora, you can go ahead, tell me about Altius.
So I actually had 2 prep courses. I did use Princeton. My friend gave me the book, so I ordered the lowest level without having them make me pay for the book, so I got to save money. And so Princeton and like a lot of other companies, they'll give you a ton of books or one book. I haven't used Kaplan yet, but I think they have several books, and they'll do like lecture-based courses on this stuff. Before I actually go into this, let me preface this that whatever test company you use will be perfectly fine as long it's really what you make out of it. It's the effort that you put into it. There is no such thing as no self-studying for the MCAT. It is all really self-study. Although Princeton and Kaplan, they're more lecture-based, and like a lot of students that use it rely on like just osmosis of the lectures, but that's really not the way to study for the MCAT. I don't recommend it. I essentially use the course just to get familiar with the topics over the summer because I was working a lot. The lectures. Yeah, I know. My AP US history gave me that analogy when I was younger, and I loved it. Altius, on the other hand, they have a very different methodology in terms of how to prepare for the MCAT. They highly say self-study and semantic memory. We're not lecturing you. You're going to come to like four classes in the week, depending on what course you take with them. And it's just review and asking questions for clarification on what you've studied. They give you a private guided tutor to like make sure that you are self-studying. If you need that extra check, I needed that extra check because, as I said, I can't focus and I was working, and I'm really bad at time management sometimes, especially long-term. Short-term, I can do it. Long-term, I hate planning. That's why I really liked Altius. And unlike other companies, they'll give you like, you're gonna start in say May, you're gonna finish your course in August. I have no idea if that's a real timeline. I'm just making up stuff. Altius, and then like that's the course. But Altius, the way that I recommend it is that they give you a timeline, and then you start 3 months before the course starts, because it's self-study. It's not the class. So whatever you do, you need to self-study. In the end, really, it's all self-study. You're not actually using the course. It's what you make out of it. That was my summary. There you go.
Thank you, Nora. I agree. I feel like all these test prep companies, it's also started to become a money-making strategy, because ultimately they're also teaching you to self-study, because that's how medical school is going to be. So if you want a taste of, really, like, I can't really compare it to medical school because I haven't been there yet, but I would have to recommend that definitely we should focus on self-study, even if you do aim for a test prep company, because you know yourself best. If you need check-ins, that's fine. There's really no correct way of studying because you know yourself best. So switching gears a bit to the next slide, please. We're going to talk more about AMCAS, which stands for American Medical College Application Service. There's another one, this is for MD programs. There's another one called ACOMAS for osteopathic medicine services. It's pretty similar. They're starting to make it much more similar to each other. So I'm going to focus on AMCAS because we're talking about the actual medical school application now. So we're going to talk a little bit. We've talked a lot about timelines. So I'm going to talk more about the verification process. So if you move on to next slide, please. Something I would recommend, this is what I did last cycle. Even though I wasn't applying last cycle, I still made a not a fake application. I just started off as though I was applying. So basically what that meant was I just made my AMCAS account. You don't need to be applying that cycle to do it. Then I just put in my identifying information because that's going to stay the same for the next year. So this is what I did last year. And I think I told a couple of my friends, but no one listened to me. But it was so helpful when I was actually applying. I didn't feel as overwhelmed because I already knew what the application kind of looked like. I kind of prefer doing that. It's like when you're going to interview somewhere, but you just do a dry run of what the place is like, just to get to know it better so that you don't feel as pressured when the time actually comes to apply. So I highly recommend if you're applying next cycle or in upcoming cycles, and if you're in college, I wouldn't recommend this for high school students. I would recommend this if you're interested in applying to medical school someday, even if it's not this cycle or this year. Still make an account, check out how it's like. You don't have to, there's no commitment to submit. This is what my application looks like now. This is a screenshot I found online, but this is what it looks like now that I've completed everything. But when it wasn't, it would just say not complete, and that's fine. I didn't submit. So it was just nice to see what the questions are, what the prompts are, etc. So I highly recommend this. If you're not applying the cycle, you can still start an application, sort of like a dummy application, so you can learn about the program yourself, because you can only learn so much from YouTube videos, because what YouTube videos show you is the processed final application, but they don't actually show you how to actually input that information. I think experience is the best teacher. So I think if you actually go in, anyone can do this, go in and kind of put in your information. It'll save you some time for the next year. And time is of the essence when you're applying to medical school. So I recommend the YouTube videos. I know if you Google, there are a lot of them out there called My Entire AMCAS Application. They're out there, but they show you the PDF form. They don't show you the web-based version that we have to input our information into. So on the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit more about MCAS verification. So MCAS verification, what that is let me just move my eraser, put that here. Here are all drawings. So MCAS verification, that basically means processing of your application. So once you submit, medical schools, like I said before, they're not going to see your application immediately. So another pro that if you apply within the first week of June, because this year our application service opened May 31st, the day it opened, Raneem applied, and I applied the day after on June 1st. So another pro that not only do medical schools see your applications sooner, better, but also medical schools receive your applications in waves. So what this chart is showing you is basically here, if you apply in the May, your number of days that you're waiting for your application to be verified. Verification means that they're actually verifying that the courses you put in are actually the courses that match your official transcripts from college. I wasn't sure, what does verifying mean? It just means that because you're inputting the coursework yourself, there are people in AMCAS that verify that for you, so that medical schools don't need to look at your transcripts. So that's all there on one page because there's so many applications to go through. So now, if you applied, let's say in July, it takes 40 days for your application to get processed. So the point I'm trying to make here is if you apply in May, it takes 10 to 20 days for it to get processed. Actually, when I applied on June 1st, my application was processed within the next 24 hours. So that was really interesting to me. Some people, it really depends on the waves. Some people get lucky. I was one of the lucky ones, but on average, it takes 2 weeks if you apply within the first 2 weeks the application opens. But when everyone else starts to apply within June, July, when they're getting more of the MCAT scores, it just takes a little longer, which means that your application may be delayed. And so that medical schools won't see it till August. But in August, there are already students who are receiving interviews. So this just means that there may be a handful less interview slots left. Now look, if there are 10,000 applications, there are only around 1,000 interview slots. And of those 1,000 interview slots, only 200, I'm just giving you a rough estimate here, only 200 seats actually exist for the medical school itself. So the 1,000 seats, right? The first time actually getting the interview. And if you're just, it's just statistically better to apply earlier, or, at this point, it'd be better to just apply in October because then your wait time will be much lower. And if you applied in September here, it would be the same as though you applied in October. So unfortunately, most medical schools, their deadlines are November 1st, or somewhere around then, like end of October, early November. So that's the deadline, but you should not see that deadline as a deadline that you should apply or aim for that. No, you should be aiming for earlier in the summer. June is fine, mid-June is fine as well. Applying month of June is probably the most ideal, even though there are little wait times, but applying in July is not something recommended because here you're seeing that your application is going to process after sometimes 40 days, that's a month. Whereas that means that what I'm trying to say is medical schools won't see your applications until August or September, which is fine. It can still work depending on your stats and you know yourself best. So for the next slide, I believe so we're going to switch gears a little bit, but let me see, we have a question in the chat box. For AMCAS essays, are they like Common App where it fits all the schools? Yes, so the question was sent to me. So for the AMCAS essays, so AMCAS does have some essays. It actually just has one essay and then a work activity section that I'm going to actually get into now. So this is a great segue. So I'm going to answer your question in the next 5 minutes. So we'll move on to common misconceptions, and then we'll move on to personal statement. So I'll go through these pretty quickly. So I already went over this, that you can only take the MCAT once. Next, that you have to buy a test prep course, otherwise you won't be successful. That's not true because you can always self-study, but you need to know the correct resources first. So do your research ahead of time. Don't do your research when you're only 3 months out from your MCAT date, but rather maybe 6 months out, 9 months out. Otherwise, I would recommend a test prep course because then they help organize it for you and they save your time. Next, we already went over this, that the pathway to medicine is not linear. Not everyone has the ideal 4 years undergrad, 4 years medical school, 4 years, or 3-4 years residency. No, it's not always like that. Even though it's very varied nowadays. Next, pre-meds have to major in biology. We went over that, how Nora mentioned her cousin who's an economics major it's really unique being able to have classmates who majored in history or literature. They have much more unique perspectives having a humanities major. I think personally for me, why I chose to major in biology was because I wanted to graduate early. I just generally just interested in neurobiology and physiology. That's just something I was very passionate about. But I was also really interested in public policy. So I still added that on as a minor. So minors are also always a great option in case you don't want to fully commit to something else besides, a science, because there's also chemistry. Very hard major. I highly respect the chemistry majors. Chemistry is not my best subject. So moving on to the next misconception, being a physician is just like Grey's Anatomy. So I know many students who are not pre-med, but I think towards the high school years when they're starting to think about what do I want to do with my life when I grow up. They get inspired by shows like Grey's Anatomy and think that that's exactly what medicine is like. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it's not. It really isn't. And that's the purpose of the reason why medical schools want you to pursue things beyond your grades and MCAT score. I'm sure people are like, why do I need thousands of hours of clinical and shadowing? It's so that you actually know that this is the profession that you're signing up for, because it's such a long training that this is actually something you want to do. And you'll learn that through experience. Like I said before, experience is the best teacher, not movie shows, not necessarily watching things about it, which sort of is a conundrum or a paradox what teleshadowing is about. But teleshadowing is here so that we can still provide opportunity to students who lack them. And we still highly recommend receiving and going into more in-person experiences, which we're going to try to push more for our students. Next, this is another thing I wish I knew. This is a really big MCAT or MCAS trick or tip. You don't need your letters of recommendation uploaded to get your application verified. That doesn't make sense. That didn't make sense to me the first time I heard that. I understood that after I applied. So basically, you don't need a letter of rec. It counts as a separate section on your application that doesn't rely on you. So your letters of recommendation really depend on your recommenders. And so there's this common misconception that you need your letters in by like May 31st or June 1st. And so that actually rushes your recommenders to get it in. But I told some of my recommenders like, hey, you can get my application, you can get my letters in by June 25th or even, mid-June. And they said, I'm so much less stressed now because I have 30 other requests that I have to get in by June 1st, because students don't actually know that you don't need your letters of recommendation in by then to get verified. The issue is verification. So once you get your letters in, that's just one part of your application. Medical schools, I believe, I may be wrong, but I think that they can still see your applications without the LORs. But I have to check on that. I'm not 100% sure, but you don't need them to actually apply to medical school. But you don't need them eventually. Next, another common misconception is that freshman grades don't matter. Actually, when I applied to medical school, even the classes I took in high school, like the college classes, they asked for those transcripts, even though they weren't from my college, University of Maryland. They were from my local community college that I just went to in high school. And I thought, hey, no one's going to see these grades. They do see these grades. So I am glad that, my grades were okay, but I know some people who kind of think that maybe freshman grades or high school grades don't matter. Your high school grades don't. Every course you have ever taken at a college that counts, that is appearing on your transcript, those are the grades that matter a lot. All right, for our next misconception, if you retake a course, which I know is a pre-med's greatest nightmare, but it's okay, it happens. If you have to drop a class and retake it the next semester, it's not the end of the world. So if you can retake some people, but unfortunately, the downside of that is that if you do retake the class, medical schools still see the original grade. So you can't replace that grade. Some colleges tend to replace the grades and you can only see the newer grade. But medical schools will see every single course you've ever taken, even the ones that you retake. So they see it, like, let's say you receive a C in chemistry, but you retake it and you get an A, they'll see both the C and the A. But it's good. You're still able to show that you improved in the subject matter and you were able to improve. And I don't think that's seen negatively. It shows your persistence and consistency. I think that this is the last common misconception we're going to go over. Since rolling admissions deadlines are in the fall, I have the entire summer before submitting my primary. That's not true. You should spend your summer on secondary applications, and you should not apply by November 1st. That's what I'm trying to say. You should be applying towards the beginning of the summer so that you can spend more time making sure that medical schools actually receive your applications, because there are a lot of them and they're only increasing year by year. All right, to address our next question, it was about, let's see, I think, where did that slide go? It was on, yeah, it should be coming up. Yeah, all right, yeah, I think we're on track. So if you move on to the next slide, is that the end? Okay, go back and let me relink you these slides. That's okay. Yeah, basically this was about the personal statement and all right, accident everyone, but that's okay. For the rest of the slides. I can also just share my screen. It's totally fine too. Yeah, after that, yeah, here we go. Personal statement. So we have a 5,300 character limit. It's not a word limit, it's a character limit. That's around a page and a half, single spaced, if that's a good context. So my first tip when you're starting off your personal statement for medical school, if you move on to the next transition, this was my Google Doc. I just took a screenshot from my actual Google Doc for my personal statement. Just put the prompt at the top of the page. That helps you actually contextualize what this personal statement is actually for. It's very different from your undergraduate personal statement because that could have been about anything. But this is specifically for why you want to become a physician, why you want to go to medical school. And I had a theme in the beginning, and it really helped me kind of put down what I wanted in writing. It was definitely a process. I personally went through multiple drafts of my essay, had a lot of feedback, maybe too much feedback. But it was really important being able to actually write on the prompt. And this is a prompt I found because I did that thing where I made my application before I was actually applying. I knew what the prompt actually was because we're always told, oh, medical school personal statement. But what does that actually mean? I feel like that may lead to some misconceptions. So I just decided to put down the prompt that they actually ask. They don't call it a personal statement. They call it a personal remarks or essay, something like that. But they don't call it a personal statement either. It's just something that we've used as layman language, but it's actually a prompt that so this is the prompt that it is. Why you want to go to medical school. It's very different from like a job personal statement, I would say. It's very different. It's very specific for why medicine. So the next thing I wanted to mention, the first thing you want to do when you're starting a personal statement is starting your theme. So you saw in the previous screenshot where I had my theme at the top. What's my intended theme? What is the message I actually want to get across to the admissions committee? And this is something I want to give credit where credit is due. This is from Medical School HQ. I'm actually going to link this workbook into the chat box right now. Even if you're not applying, this is still good. I remember I started my personal statement like my second or third year. I can link it right now, actually, just so we can all have it and save it for later if you're not going to use it now. But it was really helpful for me when I was going along. So yeah, this is called the Personal Statement Book Review Sheet from the Medical School HQ by Dr. Ryan Gray. Highly recommend. So we went over a theme. So what is the message you want to get across? Sometimes people say, for example, healthcare disparities, they're really interested about that and they really pursued it. Or maybe COVID-19, that's something, or if that was a theme for you, maybe it's about a challenge that you face that helped you pursue medicine. It can be anything. There is no set rule for the message you want to put across as long as you're conveying why medicine. It can really be anything. All right, next is actually the seed/hook. This is what Ryan Gray calls the seed. What actually planted the seed to actually start your personal, to actually start or kickstart your path into medicine? Some people have healthcare professionals in their family that they're already exposed to, and there's mixed advice out there for whether or not you should include that. But if it's a part of your story, you should include that because otherwise it might make medical school admissions committees a little bit confused as to why you randomly started doing a bunch of clinical experiences. So I think it's important. If it's a part of your story, you could talk about it. I know I personally talked about it, and I think that I was able to convey it in a way that didn't show that just because my XYZ family is a doctor, I want to be a doctor. That's definitely not the vibe I was at least trying to hope or go for. See, like it says right here, if your parent is a physician, this is a strong seed. So you should not hide from who you are just because it's cliche. Because the thing is that what I learned from his podcast, and I'm going to link the resources in a couple of slides. Really, our stories are going to be very similar because we're all very interested in a healthcare profession in a field where we're serving people, serving patients, and ultimately it will kind of sound the same to some other people, but the stories that you include and the things that you take out of it will be different. And that's through a lot of reflecting and journaling. For the next slide, this is the body, kind of watering the seed. So if, let's say, so I was really inspired by this one time I saw a healthcare or first responder take care of my grandmother, for example. But then after that, did that inspire you to go and volunteer in a clinic? Did that inspire you to go shadow? Did that inspire you to, so what really strengthened your desire and what confirmed it as you went on and moved on? So you want to support this with supporting stories and anecdotes, without getting too nitty gritty in narrative writing and creative writing, but just actually telling us a story in different ways of why medicine, how that strengthened your desire for this profession. And finally is the conclusion, where you kind of bring it all together, you tie it back into your hook sometimes. It really depends. Like, what do you want to do in the future? That's also something interesting. What do you hope to accomplish as a physician in the future? What's your vision? Because nowadays, because there are so many applications, now medical school admissions committees that I've heard are looking for the next generation of leaders in the healthcare field. They're looking for people who are going to make changes in the healthcare system or break barriers or make, this is very relevant during the time of the overturning of Roe v. Wade the other day, which is a truly unfortunate setback for healthcare in general. So this is a huge thing to talk about, and it's public health. So what are we going to do about it when we are in the shoes, when we are on the table making the decisions? And finally, so by show of hands, how many of you have been told show, don't tell? All right, yes, I see a lot of heads like show, don't tell. What does that actually mean though? Show, don't tell, show, don't tell. So in the chat box, you can write down like what you think it means, or are you confused by it? Because I was very confused by it, because I was like, does that mean I have to be a creative writer? Like, does that mean I might not get into medical school just because I'm not a good writer? Like, I was very, very confused about what does show, not tell mean. So I'm going to give an example from one of my peers. I asked their permission to kind of use one of their show, don't tell. So if you go on the next slide, I'm going to give you an example. A scenario. So in the work, so let me see, Zach, I see that you also mentioned something. I want to include what you said. Don't tell people about yourself. Show them through your experiences. Explain the story rather than just mentioning what it is from Kanisha. Yes, what it is. Exactly. So this is exactly what I'm going to show you right now. So if you move on, if you transition. So let's say you did community service at your local soup kitchen. I know this is a common experience, but we do for community service, and it's great. I love volunteering with my community, wherever it may be. So if we continue on, we'll see, so on our resumes and CVs, we would tell people and say, I volunteered at XYZ Soup Kitchen 3 days a week. I worked on meal prep and assisted staff. I poured soup or any type of food for 50 community members each week. I'm passionate about community service, and I'm so dedicated to my people. What does that actually tell admissions committees? That might tell them that I'm trying to sell myself, that I'm just telling them an experience, but I don't feel connected as a person reading this. It just sounds like anyone else who might have volunteered at a soup kitchen. For example, something that helped me a lot is like, if I could replace, so let me circle, because I'm circling and you guys don't see that. So if I am circling, or I'm pointing here, so let's say my name is Minahil here. But if I replace this name with Ben, let's say a Ben, in a random name, Ben, would that make any difference? So if this could have been Ben's description about his time volunteering at a soup kitchen, that means I did not do my job right in describing my experience. So instead, if you go into the next slide, what we should do to show this experience is actually, this is a story. This is a story about, I can summarize this while you're reading. He really went into details and showed his experience actually as though we were there. So each week my name changes to Boston, or TT for too tall. I cannot relate because I am not tall, but before the sun comes up, I cook and serve breakfast to my town's homeless population. So here I'm showing that I worked at a soup kitchen without saying I worked at a soup kitchen. I encompass a waitress role with stacks of go-to plates with frequent trips to the drink station. So this kind of also proves that this person actually did volunteer at a soup kitchen. This is specific to this person. This is not, it couldn't be a Ben or a Jane Doe or a John Doe. This is actually an actual person, and this is very unique to their application. Once this is done, I walk around and we talk with people. So here, this person is showing me that they have empathy, that they are service oriented. So without actually telling me that I'm very empathetic, I'm very compassionate. No, show that. Tell me a story about a time that you were compassionate. And that's kind of the end of that's kind of what I use, and just the same formula I use for my personal statement and work activity section. So Raneem, if you want to jump on, and I feel like people are tired of hearing me. This is something similar that you did, or what techniques did you use? Because I just talked about what worked for me.
Yeah, I pretty much did the same thing. So I know a lot of times they tell you sell yourself, make yourself look like a good applicant. And really the way you do that isn't by being like, I'm honest, or I'm a good person, or I'm moral, or I'm ethical, right? You tell the story. You bring up an example. You talk about an experience that you think showcases what it is that's good about you, or what it is that you think qualifies you to go into medicine or would make you a good doctor, and then use those experiences to kind of highlight what it is that you want to be highlighted without outright stating, I am so and so. Let the story basically tell itself, or give the message that you want to give without you outright stating it. So yeah, this is basically pretty much what I did. Instead of just stating things, I just thought of examples in my own life that I thought would tell the story for me, and then I just talked about those.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Are there any questions about this? I hope it's a little clearer now that we've kind of talked about show, not tell. It doesn't have to be a super narrative, fancy, complicated Shakespeare. This is not what this is. That's what I thought when I was like, wait, so I have to be a creative writer, talk about no. You have to kind of showcase a specific example. So yeah, like Eli said, explaining your experiences instead of just listing duties. Exactly. That's basically what we're saying. So I hope that this clarifies some things, and this example might have helped a little too. All right, so now we're getting towards the end of this talk from our panel. There's a couple of resources. You can screenshot this, and we can also make these slides available to you if you'd like. If you go into the next slide, you'll see a couple of links and resources. I highly recommend Medical School HQ. It's a very popular pre-med station. It's really, whenever you Google something related to pre-med, you'll find something on it. But really, I think that he knows what he's talking about, Dr. Ryan Gray. I think that the advice that they give is amazing. The podcast that he has really clarifies some things. I know that I've driven a lot of inspiration from him as I went along. His books are also really great. I love reading, so I actually opted to read his books more so than the videos and podcasts. So it's really, you can obtain this information in many different ways. So also about Reddits are really helpful when you're asking a specific question. So a pro MCAT tip, let's say, basically when you're taking practice exams, when you get to your MCAT preparation phase, I would highly recommend, when you're looking up answer explanations, to kind of use Reddit to guide you. So let's say it is the full length practice exam number 3, question number 5 in the psychology, sociology section. If you just Google that and then put Reddit at the end, you'll find really good explanations and resources, and even like Quizlet decks or other flashcard decks, Anki decks, to find it. I wouldn't recommend just going on their main pages for pre-med or MCAT, because there are a lot of discussions, and just scrolling through Reddit or even Instagram, for example, is not actually studying. It's not actually helping you. Because a lot of the advice is very personalized and catered to people's specific situations. It's great for inspiration. It's great for motivation if you find it useful in that way. But I found it most useful when I was just Googling my question and then typing the Reddit I wanted my answers from, and then just leaving. Because there are, sometimes it gets very, I think it's best to just stay in your own lane, competing with yourself, like I said earlier. It's also really helpful having upperclassmen students or current med students who've gone through the process, your pre-health advising office at your college or even neighboring colleges. And also we have a resources page. It's teleshadowing.com/resources, but also we have a leadership page if you're interested in talking with a team, if you want to be a panelist someday, if you want to volunteer with us. We have a medical directors team where we have our students kind of interact more closely with these positions and receive letters of recommendation as well based on the work that they've done. I think that it's been really helpful for students who are not in the area and wanting to pursue some opportunities. We found some ways to connect them. So if you're interested, teleshadowing.com/leadership, subtle plug. I would love to work with you. All right, I think that concludes the end of our talk. Thank you so much, everyone. We really appreciate you coming along and kind of listening to us. I appreciate it. If there are any lasting questions, I'm going to put my contact information in the chat box. If anyone has any lingering questions at all, feel free. So my email address is, this is my college address, but yeah, this is my email address. If ever you want to contact me, feel free. I'm always an open ear. Also, during these Zoom live chats, feel free to come in. I'm here every Saturday morning. All right. Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much, Raneem, Nora, and Minahil. I really appreciate it. It was really thorough. I enjoyed as well, and I learned. Thank you so much. You know, this is I really love this talking to you, young blood and young girls like you and young population. That's the reason I started teaching the residents and the medical school students, because they are so full of energy and I love it. And that's how we keep on moving and keep us more inspired and motivated and achieve our goals in our life. And I would like to know about, of course, I would like to add on one more thing. Dr. Qzada, last year she mentored student via teleshadowing, and she mentioned very good points about personal statement. So her session is still on YouTube channel. So last year, I think June 13th, if I'm not missing, she is a associate dean at University of Maryland School of Medicine. It was really awesome session. If anyone would like to learn more about it, please go and watch her session as well. You will get good tips from her as well. And of course, now last but not least, we all want to be successful, right? So we all here to help each other, learn from each other, and be successful together and have a bigger impact, right? So, and we all mention work together as a team, collaborate as a team. So what is the definition of success? And it's different for everyone, right? So the accomplishment, the definition I learned were, of course, I was looking up the definition, the accomplishment of aim or purpose that requires a few simple disciplines practiced every day. So now we call it self-discipline. So when I was a kid, I didn't reach much so many books, but now but I was thinking, okay, I was doing the same thing. Most important thing to be successful in life, to be self-disciplined. What does that mean? That I already mentioned before, to do the thing that you don't want to do, but you have to do every day, even small steps. Even regardless, it's your self-care, it's your well-being, it's your achieving your MCAT score, your USMLE score, your board exams, your GPA, your shadowing session. So small baby steps will make you more disciplined. Of course, your well-being is at the top priority. And of course, well-being covers your social awareness and social relationship management as well. All right. So again, but last but not least, I will talk pretty quick before we wrap up. Again, we talk about the tips, what I learned, what I applied. So your passion and profession should be the same. And please, next slide. Let me see, where can you go next? Yes. So just as I mentioned before, ask yourself why you do what you do. Why I tell you often, every time I say, please ask yourself why. Because I cannot tell you about yourself. I can just tell you tips, what worked for me, right? So this is how all the physicians come and talk to you, tell them their stories, what inspired them. So ask yourself why you want to do and what you do. Is it gonna help you? Is going to help others? Is going to help your family, your friends, your people around you, your community people? So please think about it. And when you're passionate about it, you don't get tired. You love it. Like I always give example, like if we want to watch some good movie and 3 hours or 4 hours or 2 hours flies, like we are out of time and space. We say, oh, we just started watching so good, like we're so involved, so that we are out of space and time. So just think about, so are you really passionate about it? And I can tell you, it will make your life easy. And if you're passionate about doing whatever you are doing, you will not work a single day. And again, perseverance, grit, growth mindset, always keep learning. And there's no magic in this world. Everything is practice, 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 practice. And you will be master one day. So even one day I was in your shoes as well, right? I was learning. I was at that time, there was no internet when I was in medical school. And now there are a lot of information available. So we should get used to, and of course we need to scan which information we need to apply, resources we need to use, and it will help you. And of course, add mentors in your life. They make your life easier. I still have mentors in my life in all fields, in medicine, my daily life, and from my health standpoint, from my well-being, and the community services. So always add mentors and always keep learning something new. All right, so I will stop. I think it's too much now, and never give up. And also, last but not least, I learned this book is really good book. Enthusiasm Makes a Difference. It's really good book by Dr. Hold on a second. Dr. Norman Peale. So what is enthusiasm, first of all? It's related to passion. It's a strong excitement and feeling. It's your true feeling from inside. It's just not from outside that I told you something, you say, oh, okay, I will do whatever she told me. No, it's your true inner energy level that you are so happy about doing it. So I will recommend, if you get a chance, you can read this book as well, because enthusiasm breeds the faith, and faith stimulates the action. So when you're so enthusiastic, and whenever you go for an interview, I'll just give a tip, have a shine in your eyes, that you're so passionate about it, that you love that program, why you're going there. So when you're having interview, your eyes must be a good shine in your eyes. So other person can sense your vibes, how much you're interested in that program. So I wish you all best of luck, and just start doing small baby steps, achieve small little goals, and one day you will be helping yourself and help others, and have a bigger impact together, right? That's the goal for all of us. All right, thank you everyone. And I would like to thank you again, Raneem, Nora, and Minahil. I really appreciate. And I would like to stop here. If you have any questions, please feel free to email us, contact us anytime, and we'll be more than happy to address. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, everyone, Dr. Cheema, Raneem, Nora, and Minahil, for answering all of our questions and taking this deep dive into all the topics you discussed today. Now, I'd love everyone to please give a warm thank you to Dr. Cheema and our student panel in the chat box for this incredibly informative session. Thank you. Now we're going to conduct our closing session with our quiz and future session dates. So the link to the quiz for the session is now live. And again, you'll need a 70% or higher to pass and receive certification. And the link is in the chat. And on to our next session dates. These dates will also be posted throughout our social media outlets, so be sure to follow us at TeleShadowing. We will not have a session next Saturday, July 2nd for the 4th of July weekend. So our quiz for today's session will be open until July 9th. So our next session will be July 9th at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time with our physician mentoring us in rheumatology. And this concludes today's shadowing session, everyone. Thank you all for joining us.